Today, I'd like to talk about a familiar example of how scientific management can work in everyday life. The system developed by the McDonald brothers. Most people know McDonald's as one of the largest fast food chains in the world. But before it became a global brand, it was just a small restaurant run by two brothers, Richard and Maurice McDonald, in California in the 1940s. What made their restaurant special was not only the food, but the way they organized the work. The brothers noticed that traditional restaurants were slow and inefficient. Customers had to wait a long time for their meals, and kitchens were often disorganized. So they decided to rethink the entire process of making a hamburger. Their solution was surprisingly simple. They broke the cooking process into small, specialized tasks. One worker grilled the meat, another added the toppings, another wrapped the burger, and another handled the drinks and fries. Each person focused on a single job, repeating it quickly and accurately. In many ways, this system reflected the ideas of Frederick Taylor and scientific management. Instead of relying on individual skill or improvisation, the McDonald brothers designed a standardized workflow. Every movement in the kitchen had a purpose. The goal was speed, consistency, and efficiency. The result was dramatic. The restaurant could produce hamburgers much faster than traditional diners. Customers received their food quickly, and the menu became simple and predictable. Because the process was standardized, the same system could be copied in other locations. This idea later made it possible for McDonald's to grow into a massive franchise network. Restaurants around the world could follow the same system and produce similar food with similar speed. However, the system also raised questions. When work is divided into very small tasks, employees may have less control over their work. Some critics argue that this kind of system can make jobs repetitive and less creative. Even so, the McDonald brothers' approach changed the fast food industry. Their restaurant showed that the principles of scientific management were not limited to factories. They could also be applied to everyday services. In the end, the McDonald brothers demonstrated something important. By organizing work carefully and simplifying each step, it is possible to transform a small business into a system that can operate on a global scale.
All right, listeners. Today we're stepping into a place that almost everyone on the planet recognizes: a fast food restaurant. The golden arches, the quick orders, the rhythm of burgers and fries moving across the counter. But today we're not really talking about the food, we're talking about the system behind it. Because the story of the McDonald brothers is really the story of how an idea about efficiency, an idea born in factories, found its way into everyday life. Let's rewind the track to California in the 1940s. Two brothers, Richard and Maurice McDonald, were running a small drive-in restaurant in San Bernardino. Back then, drive-ins were popular, but they were also messy operations. Customers parked their cars, waitresses called car hops brought the food out, and the menu was huge. Burgers, barbecue, sandwiches, milkshakes, lots of options, lots of movement, lots of waiting. And waiting was the problem. Orders took time. Kitchens became chaotic. Workers moved in all directions, trying to prepare different meals at once. From the outside, it looked like a busy restaurant, but from the perspective of efficiency, it was a slow and unpredictable system. The McDonald brothers began looking at their restaurant differently. Instead of thinking like cooks, they started thinking like engineers. They watched the kitchen the way a mechanic studies an engine. Where were the delays? Which steps created confusion? Which movements were unnecessary? And then they made a bold decision. They closed the restaurant temporarily and redesigned the entire kitchen. Their solution was radical for the time. Simplify everything. First, they reduced the menu dramatically. Instead of dozens of choices, they focused on a few items that could be produced quickly: hamburgers, fries, and drinks. By limiting the menu, they eliminated complexity. Second, they reorganized the kitchen around a carefully designed workflow. Every task was broken into small steps. One worker grilled the patties, another placed buns on the counter, another added pickles and onions, another wrapped the burger in paper, someone else handled the fries. Each person performed a single job, repeating it again and again. If this rhythm sounds familiar, that's because it echoes the ideas of Frederick Taylor and scientific management. Break the work into parts, study the motion, eliminate wasted effort, design a process where every action serves the larger flow. The McDonald brothers even tested their system in an unusual way. They went out to a tennis court and used chalk to draw the layout of their future kitchen on the ground. Then they asked workers to walk through the motions of cooking and serving food. They adjusted the layout again and again until every movement felt smooth and efficient. What they created became known as the speedy service system. And once the system started running, the results were dramatic. Food came out incredibly fast. Customers didn't have to wait for waitresses or long cooking times. The process was simple, predictable, and consistent. In many cases, a hamburger could be prepared in less than half a minute. But speed was only part of the story. Because the system was standardized, it could be copied. Another restaurant could follow the same kitchen layout, the same menu, the same process, the same rhythm of tasks. What began as a local experiment soon became a model for expansion. Eventually, entrepreneur Ray Kroc recognized the potential of this system and helped turn it into a franchise network. From there, the McDonald's method spread across the United States and then across the world. Today, millions of customers are served every day using variations of the same basic workflow. But every system has trade-offs. When work is divided into very small tasks, it becomes easier to train workers quickly. However, the job itself can become repetitive. Employees may perform the same movement hundreds of times during a shift. Critics have often pointed out that systems like this can reduce work to mechanical routines. In this sense, the fast food kitchen becomes a modern echo of the factory assembly line. Still, the achievement of the McDonald brothers cannot be ignored. They showed that the principles of scientific management were not limited to heavy industry. They could transform services, restaurants, and everyday consumer experiences. So the next time you step into a fast food restaurant and watch the kitchen moving with almost mechanical precision, take a moment to notice the rhythm. Behind the burgers and fries is an idea that has been shaping modern work for more than a century. Break the task into steps, design the process carefully, keep the flow moving. That's the system behind the counter. And once you start hearing that rhythm, you begin to realize something surprising. The same pattern is everywhere, in warehouses, in delivery networks, in digital platforms, and even in the way software teams organize their work. The golden arches may be bright and simple, but the system behind them is a carefully engineered piece of modern efficiency. And that, listeners, is how a small restaurant kitchen became one of the clearest examples of scientific management in everyday life.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I invite you to reflect on a place so familiar that we rarely stop to think about the ideas behind it, the fast food restaurant. Many of us have stood in line, ordered a hamburger and fries, and received our meal within seconds. It feels ordinary, almost inevitable. Yet behind that speed and simplicity lies a powerful organizational idea, one that traces its origins to the principles of scientific management developed in the early 20th century. The story begins with two brothers, Richard and Maurice McDonald, who ran a small drive-in restaurant in California during the 1940s. At the time, drive-in restaurants were popular but chaotic. Customers parked their cars, waitresses known as car hops delivered food to the vehicles, and the menu offered a wide variety of dishes. Orders were slow, mistakes were common, and kitchens were often crowded with workers moving in every direction at once. The McDonald brothers observed this system carefully. Instead of asking how to cook better hamburgers, they asked a different question: how could the process itself be redesigned? Their answer reflected the logic of scientific management. Rather than relying on skilled cooks who prepared entire meals from start to finish, they reorganized the kitchen around a sequence of specialized tasks. One worker grilled the meat. Another placed the buns and toppings. Another wrapped the finished burger. Fries were prepared in a separate station, and drinks at another. Each worker performed a single action repeatedly, and the entire kitchen functioned like a carefully designed production line. The brothers even tested their design on a tennis court. Using chalk, they drew the layout of their kitchen and asked employees to walk through the motions of preparing food. By adjusting the positions of workers and equipment, they gradually eliminated wasted movement and unnecessary steps. What emerged from this experiment became known as the speedy service system. The results were remarkable. Meals could be prepared far more quickly than in traditional restaurants. Customers no longer waited for waitresses to deliver food to their cars. Instead, they walked to a counter and received their order almost immediately. The menu was simplified, the workflow standardized, and the cost of each meal reduced. In one sense, the McDonald brothers demonstrated the extraordinary power of efficiency. By reorganizing work, they transformed a small restaurant into a model that could be replicated across cities, countries, and eventually the entire globe. Yet this success invites a deeper question. When we reorganize work to maximize efficiency, what happens to the meaning of work itself? Consider the experience of the worker in such a system. Instead of preparing an entire meal, that worker may spend hours performing the same narrow task, placing pickles on a bun, wrapping burgers in paper, or lowering baskets of fries into oil. The skill required to cook a full meal is replaced by the speed and precision of a single repeated motion. Some observers have argued that this transformation represents progress. After all, the system creates jobs that require less training, makes food more affordable, and allows businesses to serve large numbers of customers efficiently. Others, however, have raised concerns. If workers become specialists in extremely small tasks, they may lose a sense of connection to the product they create. Their role becomes less that of a craftsman and more that of a component within a larger machine. Here we encounter a moral dilemma that echoes debates about industrialization more broadly. Is efficiency the highest value in organizing work? Or should we also consider other goods that work can provide: skill, pride, autonomy, and participation? These questions extend far beyond the fast food industry. In warehouses, delivery networks, and digital platforms, modern management continues to apply the same logic of measurement, standardization, and optimization. Algorithms track performance, workflows are engineered for speed, and workers often perform narrowly defined tasks within complex systems. The legacy of the McDonald brothers, therefore, is not merely a global restaurant chain. It is a demonstration of how the principles of scientific management can shape everyday economic life. Their innovation made food faster and cheaper. It also revealed the tension between two visions of work, one that sees labor as a set of tasks to be optimized, and another that sees work as a meaningful human activity. Perhaps the challenge for modern societies is not to reject efficiency altogether. Few of us would want to return to a world where simple services require long delays and unpredictable results. But neither should we assume that efficiency alone defines progress. The real question is how we balance the benefits of efficient systems with the human values that give work its meaning. If we can ask that question honestly, whether in factories, restaurants, or digital workplaces, we may begin to see that the true measure of a system is not only how quickly it produces results, but how well it serves the people who live and work within it. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson behind the familiar golden arches, not simply the triumph of efficiency, but the enduring question of what work ought to mean in a modern society.